Of the trying long march, the Red Army makes light. Thousands of rivers and mountains are barriers slight. The 5 serpentine ridges outspread like rippling rills. The pompous Wumeng peaks tower, but like molehills. Against warm cloudy cliffs beat waves of golden sand. With cold iron chain bridge, River Dadu is spanned. Glad to see the Min Range snow-clad for miles and miles. Our warriors, who have crossed it, break into broad smiles. It's July the 1st, 2016, and at a mass meeting marking the 95th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China, President Xi Jinping delivers a speech.
我们要永远保持建党时中国共产党人的奋斗精神，永远保持对人民的赤子之心，一切向前走都不能忘记走过的路，走得再远，走到再光辉的未来，也不能忘记走过的过去，不能忘记为什么出发，面向未来，面对挑战，全党同志一定要不忘初心，继续前进。
In August 1936, American reporter Edgar Snow arrived at Bao'an in northern Shanxi. There, he took an iconic photograph. Mao Zedong and the Red Army had only recently settled into the area. The success of the Long March seemed to Mao a vindication of the inflexible will demonstrated by the Red Army and the Communist Party of China. As for Snow, he sensed that the communist red flag would soon be flying over all of China. This photograph, taken in the winter of 1936, shows Mao Zedong with Red Army Commander-in-Chief Zhu De. Zhu was 50 at the time and Mao 43, while Zhou Enlai was just 38. In the prime of life, and having survived the test of the Long March, they were the widely respected senior leadership of the CPC and Red Army. The Long March had shaped the CPC into a mature and strong party. It had produced scores of officers and backbone CPC cadres. It offered hope for the great rejuvenation of China, a country that had been trapped in national crisis. Mao Zedong said, "The end of the Long March created a brand new situation." However, Kuomintang leader Chiang Kai-shek was infuriated by the communist success. He moved Hu Zongnan's crack troops to Shanchengbu, from where they could launch another massive attack against the Red Army in its new base. In response, on November 18, 1936, the CPC Central Committee issued a mobilization order. After joining forces just a month before, the 1st, 2nd and 4th Front Red Armies now began preparing for a joint operation. By bringing its full force to bear, the Red Army decimated Hu Zongnan's army. This marked the ultimate failure of Chiang Kai-shek's 6-year-long effort to destroy the Red Army. On December the 12th, 1936, 20 days after the Battle of Shanchengbu, Kuomintang generals Jiang Xueliang and Yang Hucheng perpetrated what would become known as the Xian Incident. They kidnapped Chiang Kai-shek with the intention of forcing him to join with the communists in fighting the Japanese invaders. The CPC sent a delegation, led by Zhou Enlai, to mediate. Eventually, Chiang accepted the proposal to end the civil war and unite with the communists to counter the Japanese aggression. The Japanese, having provoked the July 7th incident in 1937, boasted that they would annihilate China within 3 months. In their arrogance, the invaders could only see a China that was growing weak under an impotent government. What they failed to recognize was that a new force had emerged, the CPC, that was now at the forefront of the resistance movement. On August 25th, 1937, in accordance with an agreement reached by Kuomintang and CPC, the Chinese Workers' and Peasants' Red Army was renamed. Henceforth it would be known as the 8th Route Army of the National Revolutionary Army. The 8th Route Army, with Zhu De as commander-in-chief and Peng Dehuai as his deputy, comprised 3 divisions. The 115th Division was formed on the basis of the 1st Front Red Army, the 120th Division, on the 2nd Front Red Army, and the 129th Division largely on the 4th Front Red Army. In the course of 10 years of trials and tribulations that culminated in the Long March, the CPC and Red Army had formed an invincible force. With their country under threat from foreign aggressors, they did not hesitate to act. On September 25th, 1937, in the Battle of Pingxingguan, the 115th Division of the 8th Route Army annihilated a Japanese force of 1,000 men and destroyed more than 100 vehicles. This, the first Chinese victory over the Japanese since the launch of the United Front, boosted the Chinese people's morale and raised the profile of the CPC and the 8th Route Army. It also shattered the myth of the invincibility of the Japanese army. 23 days later, the 8th Route Army's 120th Division faced the Japanese in the Battle of Yanmenguan. In another Chinese victory, the enemy suffered 500 casualties and lost dozens of vehicles. On the very next day, the 8th Route Army's 129th Division conducted a successful night raid on the Japanese airport at Yangmingbu, destroying 24 planes. Throughout the course of a month, the 8th Route Army, formed from the Red Army, dealt a series of blows against the Japanese invaders. On November 7th, 1939, during the Battle of Huangtuling, Yang Chengwu lured a Japanese army into a valley. During a fierce battle, the Japanese suffered more than 900 casualties. Among those killed was one of Japan's most famous generals, Norihide Abe. Norihide Abe was 52 at the time. Yang Chengwu was just 25. The Youthful Communist Party of China and its People's Army, having braved the Long March, was becoming the main force in saving the country. They were determined to safeguard the nation's independence and resist the aggression. At the 7th CPC National Congress, held from April to June 1945, it was agreed that a military campaign be conducted to regain northeast China. Subsequently, a force comprising 100,000 soldiers, 20,000 officers, and over a quarter of the CPC Central Committee's members and alternate members headed for the northeast. Mao Zedong described this as another long march. In June 1946, Chiang Kai-shek, going back on his earlier commitment to a united front, started a second civil war. The ensuing confrontation between the Kuomintang and the CPC would decide the fate of the country. On July 30th, 1947, Liu Bochang and Deng Xiaoping led the Central Plainsfield Army across the Yellow River. This marked the start of a strategic advance by the Communist military, now known as the People's Liberation Army. Through three major military actions, the Liaoxi Shenyang, Huaihai, and Beiping-Tianjin campaigns, the Chinese People's Liberation Army achieved a major victory over the Kuomintang. After just 3 years of fighting, the People's Liberation Army raised the red flag over Chiang Kai-shek's residence. Amid the roar of gunfire, the PLA set the stage for the emergence of a new China. On the day when the People's Republic was founded, many Red Army veterans stood on the Tiananmen Gate Tower as state leaders. Others paraded through the square. The Long March raised the Chinese nation's indomitable spirit to new heights. A powerful moral strength was created, which would come to the fore again in the Korean War. On June 25, 1950, the Korean War broke out. On September 15th, UN armed forces landed at Incheon. Despite repeated stern warnings from the Chinese government, commander of UN forces Douglas MacArthur carried the war to the banks of the Yalu River on China's border. MacArthur, who had previously served as commander-in-chief of Allied forces in the Pacific during World War II, confidently assured President Truman that China would not send troops to Korea. This vow, made by the first contingent of Chinese volunteer soldiers who entered Korea, would become their battle song. New China's steel production at the time was merely 1/146th of America's, and its national income 1/16th. The UN armed forces under MacArthur's command numbered 444,000 men, supported by 1,100 combat aircraft and more than 200 naval vessels. The US Army was fully mechanized, with a single corps equipped with 7,000 vehicles. By contrast, the total number of vehicles in the entire Volunteers Army was fewer than that for a single US Army corps. CPC-led forces had 23 uninterrupted years' experience of combat. Mao Zedong revealed how significant he believed this was when he said, "The indomitable and valiant army will crush all enemies and will never surrender to anyone." Most of the staff officers of the Volunteers Army were former Red Army soldiers who'd participated in the Long March. The Chinese Volunteers' 9th Army Group was dispatched from the warm climate of East China directly to the Korean battlefield at Lake Changjin, otherwise known as the Chosin Reservoir, where the temperature could fall below -40. They hadn't even had time to prepare any winter clothes. Many of the middle and high-ranking officers, as former members of the Red Army, were used to surviving snow, high mountains, and grassland.
华东部队啊，上海这个地方的，是吧？这个地方的部队面衣，它虽然上它包啊，面衣是1斤半，北方的面衣是3斤半。
Dressed in their thin uniforms with only frozen potatoes to eat, the volunteer soldiers fought a fierce 13-day battle on snow-covered terrain. Facing them were the US Army's well-equipped and well-fed 1st and 7th Divisions. The Americans were awestruck. Only years later did they learn about the glorious traditions of the forces they'd been fighting. They acknowledged that the Chinese army had an indomitable spirit and soldiers with the courage to make sacrifices. Shanganling is a narrow strip of land covering just 3.7 square kilometers. Here, while thousands of artillery shells rained down on them, the Chinese volunteers won their reputation for gallantry and endurance. The commanders of the two opposing armies were James Van Fleet of the US 8th Army, who was 61 years old, and 39-year-old Qin Jiwei of the Chinese 15th Volunteer Army, who had joined the Red Army at 15. Li Desheng arrived later with his 12th Volunteer Army to reinforce the Chinese forces. Over the course of 43 days, the US Army deployed 60,000 men, 300 big guns, and 170 tanks. This vast army was supported by aircraft, which provided carpet bombing during 3,000 sorties.
飞机、大炮向那个阵地轰，因此这个阵地啊，无深山阵地，一个山头不但没有了这个树木，而且把这个山头的岩石都炸低了2米，炸低了2米。在无深山上，我们拿回来一根木头，拿回来一根木头。 那个木头上面就有敌人的炮弹皮子几十块。上甘岭的建议可惜大风了，风到什么程度呢？王金山副司令、代司令说，要准备所有的战士都要准备当班长、当排长。 甚至当连长、当营长，过去一次参军半年的战士，当了大超的连长。陈继贵军长说：“习武军流血不流泪，为了参军的胜利，习武军打完了，在所不惜。”
Van Fleet ultimately had to admit defeat at Shanganling. The Red Army officers and soldiers who had braved the long march had developed the skill in combat and the heroic spirit to see them through any trial on the battlefield. On July the 27th, 1953, Commander-in-Chief of UN Forces Mark Clark signed the Korean Armistice Agreement. He would later describe the pain he had felt as the only US Army commander ever forced to sign an armistice after failing to win a war. The Chinese People's Volunteers Army's commander and political commissar, Peng Dehuai, also signed the armistice. A comment by Peng Dehuai has become well known around the world. The time has passed when an imperialist country could conquer a country or a nation in the east simply by deploying a few cannon. The Long March tempered the soldiers who took part in it. From the War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the War of Liberation to the war in Korea, China's armed forces demonstrated a firm conviction and outstanding courage. The Long March encouraged its participants to achieve something remarkable. Among them, many would become pillars of the country. In 1955, when the People's Liberation Army first conferred military ranks, 9 of its 10 marshals were Long March veterans, as were 8 of 10 senior generals and more than 90% of other generals. After the founding of New China, the top officials of 27 out of a total of 34 ministries and commissions had taken part in the Long March, as had the top leaders of 17 out of 30 provinces, municipalities, and autonomous regions. They had all stayed true to their mission and conviction, and in New China, they would play a leading role in another battle, this one against poverty. When the West doubted New China's capacity to feed its hundreds of millions of people, the former Red Army General Wang Zhen, at the head of tens of thousands of officers and soldiers, traveled to Xinjiang, Heilongjiang, and Hainandao. There, the troops would open up the virgin land and create granaries for the new country. Facing a blockade by the West, Youthful, the Red Army's fabled one-armed general, led troops to the Songliao Plain. Braving the freezing cold of -30, they succeeded in striking oil. This meant the country was no longer dependent on others for its energy supplies. Confronting the Western monopoly and technology embargo, former Red Army General Nie Rongjian went to the Gobi Desert at the head of a national defense science and technology force. Living for years in isolation, they finally succeeded in developing the atomic bomb, the hydrogen bomb, missiles, and satellites. "80 years have passed, and the great Long March spirit has been fused into the national spirit. It's embodied in the Yan'an spirit, the Xibaipo spirit, the spirit of developing atomic and hydrogen bombs and satellites, as well as the Qinghai-Tibet Railway spirit, the spirit of Wenchuan earthquake relief, the spirit of manned spaceflight. Wherever China has faced a crucial moment or adversity, people recall the Long March and gain strength from it.
One for all. China 24.
Mao Zedong said, winning national liberation was just one step on a long march. China's revolution is great, and the road after will be longer and littered with bigger and harder tasks. That should be made clear to the whole party now. Make sure the comrades remain modest, prudent, and free from arrogance and rashness, and make sure the comrades maintain the style of hard work and plain living. Deng Xiaoping said, looking back on the road we have traveled, was there ever a chance for the Chinese Revolution to win final victory without the Communist Party? Impossible. Only our party could have withstood 10 years of bloody terror, encirclement, and suppression by an enemy millions strong, and endured the 25,000 li long march. Jiang Zemin said, we should pass down the long march spirit from generation to generation, encouraging and inspiring the Chinese people to work hard, forge ahead, and strive constantly for fresh victories on the new long march and for the construction of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Hu Jintao said, the Long March spirit is a vivid reflection of the revolutionary style of the CPC and the People's Army, a showcase of the Chinese national character of ceaseless self-improvement, and the highest embodiment of the national spirit with patriotism as the core. Xi Jinping said, the great spirit of the Long March is a vivid reflection of the CPC's revolutionary style. We must inherit and carry forward this spirit, always taking the new reality into consideration. On the new long march of advancing the cause of socialism with Chinese characteristics, we must relay this spirit over the long term. Every generation has its own long march to focus on. It's November the 29th, 2012, and President Xi Jinping and the rest of the Politburo are visiting the exhibition The Road to Revival. For the first time, Xi expounds on the concept of the Chinese dream.
我以为实现中华民族的伟大复兴，就是中华民族近代最伟大的中国梦。因为这个梦想啊，它是凝聚和寄托了几代中国人的夙愿，它体现了中华民族和中国人民的整体利益，它是每一个中华儿女啊的一种共同的期盼。
The Chinese dream has sparked the enthusiasm of people across the country. It evokes their vision of a good life and lights up the way for hundreds of millions of people making the march to prosperity. With the dream ahead, the road underfoot, and led by the CPC with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, the Chinese people have set out on a new long march. In a statement directed at the entire party, Xi Jinping said, "Be ready at all times to respond to major challenges, to resist great risks, to overcome great resistance, and to solve major problems. We should develop socialism with Chinese characteristics and uphold and consolidate the party's leadership and its ruling position so that our party, our country, and our people will be invincible. Since the 18th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, the CPC Central Committee has proposed a series of new concepts and strategies for the country's governance, which have created fresh prospects for the cause of socialism with Chinese characteristics. These new concepts and strategies include the 2 centenary goals, aimed at promoting all-round economic, political, cultural, social and ecological progress, as well as the 4 comprehensives. There is also the 5 development concept of innovation, harmonization, greenness, openness, and sharing. By overcoming every difficulty and braving all adversity, the comprehensive deepening of reform is being steered towards deep water areas. Innovation-driven development, mass entrepreneurship, and supply-side reform are helping to unleash the country's new vitality. The comprehensive development of the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region and the Yangtze River Economic Zone is creating new social and economic opportunities. The Internet Plus, big data, and cloud computing are underpinning new patterns of China's development, as are the strategies of Eastern leadership, Western development, the revitalization of the Northeast, and the rise of Central China. The CPC Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping as the core, based on a long-term vision and high goals, is constantly assessing the changing situation. It has shown a remarkable ability to understand and adapt to the new normal and to guide the economy accordingly. China is making efforts to build itself as a socialist cultural power. It nurtures and practices the core values of socialism and preserves China's excellent culture. In this way, it is consolidating the foundations of the nation's cultural soft power. From 2011 to 2015, the Chinese economy grew at an average annual rate of 7.3%. The annual increment is equal to the economic aggregate of a moderately developed country. By contributing 25% to global economic growth, China has become a major engine of the world economy. Xi Jinping said, "An overall well-off society means all Chinese people are able to live a well-off life with no one being left behind. In the coming 5 years, we plan to lift all 70 million people now living below the poverty line above it." Xi Jinping, in the course of numerous investigation tours across some 20 provinces, municipalities, and autonomous regions, has brought real benefits to ordinary people. Guided by the principle of seeking truth from facts, the Chinese leadership has, by adopting measures appropriate to the local conditions, provided specific guidance to different regions and introduced a targeted poverty relief program. He has said that on the road to a well-off society, the government will not miss a single person who is struggling in poverty. Hua Mao in Zunyi County was visited by the Red Army on the Long March. In June 2015, Xi Jinping comes to the village. He tours the smart temperature control greenhouse, the homes of CPC members and ordinary villagers, and a service center selling local produce. He expresses his delight at the success achieved here by the targeted poverty relief efforts. And he praises the village for the way it has promoted the combination of idyllic scenery, red culture, pottery making, and industrial development. Jiang Taibu in Ningxia witnessed the reunion of Red Army forces during the Long March. Nearby Liupanshan is one of the 14 officially recognized poorest regions in the country. It's July 2016, and President Xi Jinping is visiting the county for the second time. He inspects the houses and chats with the weathered CPC members, the first few wealthy locals, several poverty-stricken people, and some religious leaders. "Seeing how much better your life is, I am so pleased," Xi says. He comments that by 2020, the country will have realized the goal of lifting all the people out of poverty. The Chinese dream, which embodies the yearning of ordinary people for a good life, needs them to make a concerted effort. Everyone is called on to participate in and contribute to the country's development, and this in turn brings them a sense of achievement and happiness. In carrying forward the spirit of the Long March, the Chinese people should strengthen their principles and conviction, enhance their political awareness, learn from others, and adhere to the policy of comprehensively strengthening party self-discipline. In this way, they can better handle the historic task of governing for the people and rejuvenating the country.
这个长征的精神，我们就还要继承。时代变了，所有条件都变了，但是我们不忘初心，继续前进。我们为之奋斗的理想、事业是不变的。
With more than 1.3 billion people, China is the biggest country in the world in terms of population, and the CPC is the world's largest party, with its 88 million members. Even though the CPC has ruled the country for so long, party building remains critical and influences every facet of life. On July the 11th, 2013, Xi Jinping comes to Xibaipo, where he visits the site of the second plenary session of the 7th CPC Central Committee. In a conversation with grassroots cadres and party members, he says, "I have been here many times, all with reverence and profound thought. When the CPC Central Committee left Xibaipo, Comrade Mao Zedong used the term heading to the capital for the imperial exam. Over 60 years later, we've achieved remarkable progress. The Chinese people have stood up and become wealthy. However, the challenges and problems facing us are still grave and complex. It can be said that the exam facing our party is far from being over." To build a great country needs an effective and clean ruling party and government. The CPC Central Committee has addressed this. It has provided educational and practical activities on the mass line and opposing formalism, bureaucracy, hedonism, and extravagance. It has conducted a special education campaign called the 3 Stricts and 3 Honests, as well as activities for studying the CPC Charter and rules and President Xi's speeches. As the anti-corruption campaign deepens, the party continues to crack down on the flies at the bottom and the tigers higher up. Corrupt officials who have fled abroad have been brought to justice. Owing to China's tough stance on corruption and zero tolerance of it, corrupt officials have no place to hide. Everyone is responsible for their actions, and party members are expected to exercise discipline that is even stricter than the national law. It's essential, in tightening party discipline, to eradicate recreational activities using public funds, traveling at public expense, and the private use of government vehicles. President Xi Jinping personally selected Lankao in Henan province as the focal point of the educational and practical activities to promote the party's mass line. He said, "My generation grew up influenced by Zhao Yulu's inspiring deeds. His image is deeply rooted in my mind." He quoted a poem he himself had written several years before called Commemorating Zhao Yulu. "The soul, thousands of miles away, is missed by the people, the mountains, the rivers, and all that is here. People all love good officials and weep when they depart. Living or dead, the same sand dune, his life was linked to the local people." During times of war, the party relied on the people. Now, with the party in power, people hold the same importance for it as before. The party's prospects and destiny both hinge on whether the people are for or against it. Popular sentiment, as the greatest political force, equates to power. The party's members and leaders should always cherish their party and the people, and take a serious view of their responsibilities and discipline. They should be loyal to the party, remain clean in their actions, and have the courage to assume responsibilities. It's crucial for leaders to remain fair and uncorruptible, for government to be clean, and for the political system to be transparent.
我坚持，我坚持，我志愿加入中国共产党，我志愿加入中国共产党，拥护党的纲领，拥护党的纲领。
October the 30th, 2014. A political work conference of the army is being held in the town of Gutian in Fujian. This was the place where the party originally established the principle of building itself through ideology and the army through politics. For the 7th time, Xi Jinping is visiting the place. He stresses that the current theme in the army's political work is to provide a strong political guarantee for achieving the goal of strengthening itself in the new situation by focusing on realizing the Chinese dream, the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. In the memorial hall of the Gutian meeting, Xi says that particular episodes in history can be more clearly observed and analyzed years afterwards. He calls on those present to think deeply about the question, where did we start? Why did we set out? Xi Jinping sits with the grassroots cadres, heroes and model soldiers eating typical Red Army food. He urges the officers and men to learn from traditions and, by loving and honoring them, preserve the intrinsic character of the Red Army. Facing the new situation, Xi Jinping points out that the goal in strengthening the army is to build a people's army that obeys the party's orders, is capable of winning any war, and has a fine work style. He says that China's army should consolidate the country's national defense and build itself into a strong fighting force commensurate with our country's international status. On September the 3rd, 2015, Xi Jinping announces that the Chinese army will shed 300,000 soldiers. This is the start of an unprecedented military reform. The Central Military Commission will take overall charge of the administration of the Chinese People's Liberation Army and the Chinese People's Armed Police. New battle zone commands will focus more on potential combat, and the various military services will be more responsible for their own development. Among the key principles of the reforms, the armed forces will, through intensified political work, operate in accordance with the law. In preparing for the possibility of war, the cultivation will be emphasized of a new generation of revolutionary soldiers with commitment, skill, and integrity, who form an army with a firm conviction and a strong sense of discipline. The foundations of the army are the grassroots. Xi Jinping recognizes this and has visited ordinary members of the armed forces operating on land, on the sea, and in the air. It's February 2013, and President Xi has come to the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center to lay a wreath. It's in honor of Marshal Nie Rongzhen and the other heroes who devoted their lives to the cause of China's aerospace science and technology development. While inspecting the army stationed in Lanzhou and meeting the duty officers and soldiers, Xi says the Northwest region, the birthplace of the spirit of Yan'an, is rich in red resources. He urges the army to make the most of them and other local advantages. April 2014, President Xi visits a military division on the outskirts of Urumqi. Despite the rain, he observes a demonstration of military combat training. He tells the officers and soldiers that they should infuse themselves with the red gene and ensure that it is handed down from generation to generation. A military force, if it is to be powerful, must focus on developing its capacity to win in war. Its fighting capability is the sole standard by which it is judged. To be powerful, it needs the best weaponry. China's nuclear submarine fleet has a significant name: Long March. 80 years ago, it was through the Long March that the world learned about the Communist Party of China and the Red Army. Today, on the new Long March of realizing the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, the world is once again witnessing the wisdom and courage of the Chinese people. The Qiantang River rises and falls, and West Lake looks as beautiful as ever. At the historic juncture, when the global economy is undergoing significant readjustment and the system of global governance is being transformed, the leaders of the G20 countries gathered in Hangzhou, China.
20国集团领导人杭州峰会开幕。
The Chinese president, in the keynote speech, puts forward a plan for global economic governance, which embodies China's resolve to assume greater responsibility. China has rolled out a range of new concepts for global governance. These include a community of common destiny of all mankind, a new type of major country relationship, and the principles of sincerity, amity, mutual benefit, and inclusiveness. From the Boao Forum to the CICA Summit Forum, from the APEC Leaders Meeting in Beijing to the G20 Hangzhou Summit beside West Lake, every appearance by Chinese leaders and every event that's part of the country's home court diplomacy has attracted worldwide attention. As Xi Jinping has said, China's door once opened will not be closed again. It's September 2015. President Xi Jinping is standing for the first time on the rostrum at United Nations headquarters. In his speech, he presents the general concept of building a common destiny of mankind and sets out the path for achieving it. His 20-minute speech is greeted with round after round of applause. In December 2015, at the Paris Climate Conference, China, with its powerful voice, provided a key impetus for reaching the Paris Agreement. The Belt and Road Initiative has received a warm and active response from dozens of countries and international organizations. Like two ribbons, the Belt and Road will link the destiny of 4.4 billion people. On the night of Mid-Autumn Festival 2016, a Long March 2 rocket carried the Tiangong 2 Space Lab into orbit. While the whole nation was commemorating the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Red Army's Long March, the Shenzhou 11 manned spacecraft was launched. It would dock with the Tiangong 2 Space Lab. The Chinese nation has always been courageous and ambitious in chasing dreams. On the new Long March, myths are becoming reality.
Today, 我们比历史上任何时期都更接近中华民族伟大复兴的目标，比历史上任何时期都更有信心、有能力实现这个目标。我们完全可以说，中华民族伟大复兴的中国梦一定要实现，也一定能够实现。
The Chinese nation must stay true to its original mission and forge ahead on the new Long March. The Long March will always be an inspiration to the nation in displaying its 5,000 years of splendid civilization, realizing its long-cherished dreams, and channeling the powerful strength unleashed by the reform and opening. The CPC Central Committee, with Xi Jinping as the core, is steering the huge ship of China towards a bright future. By braving the waves, it is valiantly forging ahead.